Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It all started on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. The kind of day where nothing unusual ever happens, yet something in the air feels different. I'm Evelyn, 62 years old, and I've lived a quiet life in a small town just outside of Denver. My husband, Robert, and I have been married for over 35 years. We've raised 2 children, had our fair share of highs and lows, and grown comfortable in the rhythm of life. Or, at least, that's what I thought. Robert has always been a loyal and hard-working man, and for the past decade, he's worked at a local marketing firm. His boss, Daniel Hawthorne, is a man in his early 50s, charismatic and with an air of authority that's hard to ignore. I'd met Daniel a handful of times at company events, smooth, polished, always the professional. But on this particular afternoon, things took a turn I never could have expected. I had been helping out at a local charity event that day, and Robert had come to pick me up around 3:30, his usual routine. As we drove home, he seemed unusually quiet, his mind preoccupied with something I couldn't quite place. He had that distant look in his eyes, the kind he gets when there's something weighing heavily on him, but he's not ready to talk about it. When we arrived home, I was eager to wind down after the busy day. I had just settled into my favorite armchair with a cup of tea when the phone rang. It was Robert's work phone, which I rarely answered. But that day, something told me I should pick it up. "Hello," I said, my voice steady but curious. "Mrs. Evelyn." It was Daniel's voice, smooth, controlled, but there was a hint of something deeper in it. "It's Daniel Hawthorne. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to speak with you privately." "Is this a good time?" I was taken aback. Daniel had never called me before, at least not without Robert present. I looked over at my husband, who was pacing near the window, his back turned to me. He hadn't heard the phone ring, so he didn't know who it was. "Yes, of course," I replied, feeling an inexplicable tension building in my chest. "What's going on?" "I'd rather not discuss this over the phone," Daniel said. His tone lowered. "It's something I need to say in person. I'll be at your house in 30 minutes, if that's all right." My mind raced. Why would Daniel want to speak with me in private? I glanced at Robert again. He seemed lost in his thoughts, unaware of the conversation I was having. "Sure," I said, trying to sound calm. "We'll be here." As soon as I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. What did Daniel need to tell me? My heart beat a little faster as I tried to convince myself that there was nothing to worry about. Perhaps it was something work-related, some minor issue that had nothing to do with me at all. But the thought lingered in my mind. Why did Daniel need to speak to me? About 25 minutes later, there was a soft knock at the door. Robert was still lost in his own world, so I went ahead and answered it. Standing in front of me was Daniel, looking as polished as ever, but there was something about him today that felt different, almost vulnerable. "Mrs. Evelyn," he greeted me with a warm but tense smile, his eyes betraying a hint of hesitation. "Thank you for taking the time to speak with me." I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "Please, come in. Would you like some coffee?" "No, thank you," Daniel said quickly, his voice quiet but deliberate. "I appreciate it, but there's something I need to get off my chest, and I don't want to waste any time." I led him into the living room, where we both sat on opposite ends of the sofa. The air between us was thick with anticipation. Daniel's usual charm was absent, replaced by a kind of raw intensity I hadn't seen before. His eyes locked with mine, and for a moment neither of us spoke. "Evelyn," Daniel began, his voice low and controlled, "I'm going to tell you something, But you need to promise me that you won't tell Robert. Not yet. My heart skipped a beat. What could be so serious that it required secrecy? I nodded slowly, my hands resting on my lap as I waited for him to continue. The tension in the room grew, each second feeling like an eternity. It's about Robert, Daniel said, his gaze not leaving mine. Something I've been keeping from him, and from you. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm, but I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me. Robert? What could Daniel possibly know about Robert that I didn't? I've been having an affair with someone at work, Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. A few months ago things changed between us, and I didn't know how to handle it. I still don't. My breath caught in my throat. The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud, the silence that followed thick with disbelief. I felt my pulse quicken, my mind racing to process what Daniel had just said. An affair, I repeated, my voice shaky. With who? Daniel hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. I can't tell you yet, but what I can tell you is that it's someone close to Robert, someone who you would never expect. The room felt suddenly colder, and I couldn't help but glance over at my husband, who was still pacing in the other room. How long had Daniel been carrying this secret? And why had he chosen to tell me? What did he want from me? I didn't know what to say. I was speechless, lost in the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. What had I just learned? Why was Daniel confiding in me of all people? I looked back at him, trying to read his face, to understand what he was hoping to achieve by revealing this truth. His eyes were full of guilt, but there was something else there too, a sense of desperation. I never wanted to hurt Robert, Daniel continued, his voice thick with regret. But I need your help, Evelyn. I don't know what to do. This is all so complicated, and I've made a mess of things. His words hit me like a storm. I felt overwhelmed, confused, but a part of me understood his pain. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the complex web of relationships we all find ourselves tangled in, often without even realizing it. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why now? Daniel leaned forward, his eyes pleading with me for understanding. Because I don't want to hurt Robert, but I don't know how to fix this. And you're the only person I trust to help me find a way through this. I could feel the weight of his words, the gravity of the situation sinking in. This wasn't just about an affair. It was about the trust between two men, a betrayal that was threatening to tear everything apart. But where did that leave me? What was I supposed to do with this information? I sat there in silence, the weight of Daniel's confession pressing down on me like a suffocating cloud. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of it all. I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw him not as Robert's boss, but as a man who had made a mistake that could unravel so many lives, including his own. I don't know what to say, I whispered, my voice trembling. I never expected this. Why would you come to me? Why not talk to Robert directly? Daniel's expression faltered for a moment, his eyes clouded with doubt. He leaned back, running a hand through his short, graying hair, a gesture that seemed to reflect his inner turmoil. I can't tell him, Evelyn, he said softly. I don't know how to. I've ruined everything already, and the last thing I want is to hurt him further. But this is eating me up inside. I thought if I could talk to you, maybe you could help me find a way to make it right. I could feel my heart aching for both of them. Robert, my husband, who would never imagine this truth, and Daniel, who was clearly struggling with guilt and shame. I had always thought of Daniel as the epitome of professionalism, the kind of man who always had everything under control. Now I saw him as just another person tangled in the mess of human emotions, trying to find a way out of a situation that had spiraled out of control. "I don't know if I can help you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is so much to take in. I don't know what you're expecting from me, but I'm just Robert's wife. I can't fix this for you." Daniel's face hardened for a moment, then softened again, as if he were trying to gauge my reaction. He seemed to realize that what he had asked was too much, too soon. "You're right," he murmured. "I shouldn't have put this on you. But you're the only one who knows Robert like I do. I needed to tell someone. I don't even know how to live with myself right now." The vulnerability in his voice, the rawness of his pain, was almost too much to bear. It was as if he had let down his guard, showing a side of himself I hadn't seen before. He wasn't just the confident, successful boss anymore. He was a man struggling with the weight of his own choices. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "You've got to tell him eventually, Daniel. You can't keep this secret forever." Daniel nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor as if the weight of his actions was too much to hold. "I know, but I don't know if I can face him after everything. I've been lying to him for months, Evelyn. I don't even know if I can ever fix this." The words hung in the air, heavy and thick. The silence that followed was almost suffocating, as if the room itself had become trapped in the tension between us. I didn't know what to say next. What could I possibly say to a man who had made such a grave mistake? To a man who had just confessed to something so devastating, knowing full well it could tear his world apart? Maybe you need to take a step back," I suggested cautiously, feeling the weight of my words. "You need some time to think about what you really want, Daniel. I know Robert. He's a good man. If you truly care about him, you need to figure out how to tell him, even if it's the hardest thing you've ever done." Daniel's eyes met mine, a flicker of something like hope shining through the despair. "You think he'll ever forgive me?" I wasn't sure if I had an answer to that. Forgiveness is a complex thing. It's not something that happens overnight. It's something that requires time, understanding, and the willingness to rebuild what was broken. "I can't say," I replied softly, "but I know Robert. He's a man of honor, Daniel. He values loyalty above all else. If you show him that you're truly remorseful, and if you give him the time and space he needs, maybe there's a chance." Daniel leaned back, his hand gripping the edge of the sofa as he processed my words. His brow furrowed, and for a moment I could see him wrestling with his own guilt and fear. It was clear that he didn't know what the future would hold, but he was willing to listen. For the first time since he had walked through the door, I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Evelyn," he said quietly. "You've been more of a friend to me in this moment than I deserve." I shook my head. "I'm not your friend, Daniel. I'm Robert's wife. I'm trying to help him, and in the process, I'm trying to help you too." We sat in silence for a long while, each lost in our own thoughts. The room was heavy with the weight of the secret Daniel had shared, but there was something else in the air too, something unspoken, something that felt like the beginning of a new understanding. Finally, Daniel stood up, straightening his suit jacket with a deep sigh. "I should go. Robert's probably wondering where I am. I don't want him to get suspicious." I nodded, feeling the tension in my own body slowly begin to ease. "I'll be here, Daniel, but you need to make things right. You can't keep running from this." He gave me a small, almost rueful smile. "You're right. I'll figure it out, Evelyn. I don't know what the next step is, but I'll take it." As he walked toward the door, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease settle over me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but there was something in me that wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be repaired. Daniel had made a mistake, a big one, but we all have our moments of weakness. The question was whether or not he could find the strength to fix what had been broken. When the door closed behind him, I found myself standing there in the quiet of the living room, alone with my thoughts. What would happen next? Could I help my husband navigate this storm? Would Robert ever forgive Daniel? And more importantly, could we all move forward from this moment? I didn't have the answers, but for the first time in a long while, I realized something important. Sometimes the hardest thing to do isn't just face the truth, but to live with the consequences of it. And the path forward, whatever it looked like, would take time, patience, and a whole lot of heart. The days that followed Daniel's confession were a blur, filled with a strange sense of tension that I couldn't shake. I went through the motions of my daily routine, cooking, cleaning, helping Robert with his work. But there was always that gnawing feeling in the back of my mind, the sense that everything was about to change. I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel and his burden. But more than that, I couldn't stop thinking about Robert, my husband, the man who trusted me more than anyone else, the man who had no idea what had transpired between his boss and me. Every time I looked at him, I felt a deep ache in my chest. It wasn't just the guilt of keeping Daniel's secret from him. It was the fear of what would happen when the truth finally came out. Would it tear our lives apart? Could we rebuild what was broken? I wasn't sure of the answers, but one thing was certain. I had to be there for Robert, no matter what. It was late one night, just after dinner, when the tension in the air finally became too much to ignore. Robert had been distant lately, and I could feel the weight of it pressing on both of us. We had sat down to watch a movie together, but his mind seemed to be elsewhere. Every time I tried to engage him in conversation, he would give me a distracted reply, his eyes flicking over to the screen without really seeing it. "Robert," I said gently, "is everything okay?" He paused, his hand frozen mid-air as he reached for the remote. I could see the strain in his face, his furrowed brow, and the tension in his shoulders. For a moment, I thought he might brush me off, but instead, he set the remote down and turned to face me. "I've been thinking about Daniel," he said quietly. "He's been acting strange lately, hasn't he?" I felt a lump form in my throat. My heart raced as I searched for the right words, but none came to me immediately. This was it. The moment I had been dreading. I had to tell him something, but what? Should I tell him the truth? Or should I keep pretending that everything was normal, that there was no secret between us? "Yeah, I've noticed," I replied carefully, trying to sound casual. "He's been a little off lately. I'm sure it's nothing." Robert gave me a small, knowing smile, but there was something in his eyes that made my heart ache. "I don't know, Evelyn. I've worked with him for years, and I've never seen him like this. I'm starting to wonder if something's going on, if maybe I'm not seeing the full picture." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. He was starting to suspect something, and I couldn't bear the thought of him finding out the truth this way. I had to find a way to reassure him, to keep him from digging too deep. "Robert, you're overthinking it," I said, trying to sound confident. "Daniel's been under a lot of pressure lately, with work and everything. Maybe he just needs some time to adjust. You know how he is." But Robert wasn't convinced. He looked at me, his gaze piercing, as if searching for something deeper. "I don't know, Evelyn. Something's not right. I can feel it. And I think Daniel's hiding something from me. He's always been the kind of guy who doesn't show his hand, but I've known him long enough to tell when something's off." I swallowed hard, my heart racing. This was it, the moment where I had to make a choice. Do I tell him everything? Do I protect Daniel's secret? Or do I let Robert find out on his own? Before I could say anything, Robert stood up, running his hands through his hair in frustration. I'm going to call him. I need to talk to him. Robert, wait, I said, rising to my feet. I grabbed his arm, my fingers trembling as I held him back. Don't do it. Not like this. He looked at me, his eyes filled with confusion and frustration. Why not? If there's something going on, I need to know. I need to fix it. I know, I whispered, my voice shaking. But maybe there's a better way to handle this. Please, just give it some time. He stared at me for a long moment, as if weighing my words against his instincts. Finally, he sighed, letting his shoulders slump in resignation. I don't understand, Evelyn. Why are you being so protective of him? I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I blinked them back, because I know what he's going through. I know what he's hiding. Robert's gaze softened as he took a step toward me, his face filled with concern. Evelyn, what's going on? What do you know? I closed my eyes, my heart racing. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to confess, to unburden myself, but I couldn't find the words. The truth was so much more complicated than I had ever imagined, and I wasn't sure if Robert could handle it. I can't say, Robert, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Not yet. Please just trust me for a little while longer. He nodded slowly, though I could see the doubt still lingering in his eyes. I don't like this, Evelyn. I don't like not knowing. I know, I said softly. But sometimes there are things we need to work through on our own before we share them with others. Robert stood there for a moment longer, his eyes fixed on mine, before he sighed deeply and pulled me into his arms. I could feel the warmth of his embrace, and for a brief moment everything felt safe again. But I knew that this peace wouldn't last forever. The truth was coming, whether I was ready for it or not. The days after our conversation passed in a haze of unease. I could sense the strain between Robert and me, despite the quiet nights we spent together. He was trying, I could tell, but something inside me kept pulling me back, reminding me of the secret I was harboring. Every time I looked at him, I felt the weight of it on my chest. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, and I knew we couldn't go on like this for long. It wasn't until a week later that things finally came to a head. It was a rainy Thursday evening, and Robert had just returned from work. He was exhausted as usual, but there was something different about his mood tonight. He seemed distracted, his mind occupied with something I couldn't quite place. When he walked into the living room, he didn't even acknowledge me at first, his mind elsewhere. I stood up from the couch, my pulse quickening. Robert, is everything all right? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned to face me, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. I talked to Daniel today, he said, his voice low. He finally admitted it. The air seemed to thicken around me as I froze, my heart dropping to my stomach. My worst fear had come to life. Robert had learned the truth. I tried to mask my panic, but I'm sure he could see right through me. He took a step closer, his eyes searching mine. He told me about the promotion he was offering me. He told me that you were the one who told him I'd been considering it, and that, well, he said a lot more than that, about everything that happened between you two. I felt the floor drop out from beneath me as the words sank in. It wasn't just the promotion. It wasn't just Daniel's sudden urgent request. It was all of it. The conversation, the tension, the emotions that had been building between us. The secret I had been carrying was no longer mine to keep. I'm so sorry, I whispered, my voice breaking. I should have told you. I didn't want to hurt you, Robert. I never meant for any of this to happen. He was silent for a long time, his eyes never leaving mine. I could see the hurt in his gaze, but also something else, something softer, like understanding. He stepped forward and reached for my hand, his touch gentle but firm. "I don't know what to say, Evelyn," he said quietly. "I'm angry. I'm hurt. But I also understand, in a way. I know how Daniel can be. He can be convincing, persuasive. But I never thought it would go this far. I never thought it would involve you." "I didn't want to get involved," I said, my voice trembling. But he was going through something. I didn't know how to say no. And when he told me everything, I felt this sense of responsibility, like I had to help him. "But I never meant to betray you, Robert. Never." Robert squeezed my hand, his face a mixture of confusion and sadness. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you for this, Evelyn. But I'm willing to try. We've been through a lot together, and I know this wasn't easy for you, but we have to be honest with each other from now on." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I know, Robert. I know." He pulled me into a tight embrace, and I clung to him as if he were the only thing keeping me grounded in that moment. My mind was spinning, my emotions a whirlwind of guilt, shame, and relief. It had taken so long for us to reach this point, and now that we were here, I wasn't sure what the future would hold. But one thing was certain: our relationship had been forever changed by the secret that had come to light. A few days later, Daniel called. I hadn't heard from him since that night, and part of me wondered if I would ever see him again. But when I picked up the phone, his voice was soft and remorseful. "I'm sorry, Evelyn," he said. "I never meant for things to go this far. I should have never put you in that position. I don't know what I was thinking." I didn't know what to say to him. He was the man who had crossed a line, who had put me in the middle of a situation I never wanted to be part of. But in that moment, I realized something. He was just as lost as I had been. We had both made choices that led us down this path, but we could never undo what had happened. "I can't fix this, Daniel," I said quietly. "And I can't be a part of whatever it is you're trying to do anymore. But I hope you can find your way back." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before he spoke again. "I understand, Evelyn. I really do. I'll never forget what you did for me, but I know I have to move on. I wanted you to know that." And with that, the conversation ended. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief wash over me. Daniel had made his choices, and I had made mine. Now all that was left was to rebuild my life, to repair the bond I had with Robert, and to move forward. It wasn't easy, the days that followed. Robert and I still had a lot of work to do, but we were learning to be open with each other, to communicate without fear of judgment or reprisal. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I knew we were stronger for having faced the truth together. As for Daniel, I hadn't seen him since that day. I didn't know what the future held for him, and I didn't need to. He had his own path to follow, and I had mine. And through it all, I had learned something valuable: the importance of honesty, the strength of forgiveness, and the power of moving forward, even when it seems like the world is crashing down around you. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours to live, and for that, I was grateful.